Thank you, Miriam. I know we are global tonight with Paris and London, California, West Coast, and we are all over the place. So thank you everyone for coming. Since it's a small group of us, certainly this is a networking opportunity. So it doesn't just need to be me asking questions. So if panelists have questions for each other, feel free. I'm happy to ask any question that we've planned in advance, but certainly you could put them in the chat, or even we'll take pause and you can come off mute and ask the question yourselves. It seems we have most people on the call have some working experience, and so we'll at least be able to talk through examples of finding your voice. The purpose of coming back for a two-part series is specifically to think through of how last call went on thinking about leadership, the concept, what people value, and how they then can start to apply it, and then bringing it back to find comfort in that voice, because at first it can feel uncomfortable. Joanne mentioned last time on the call that this was so much fun and she just wanted to hang out with everyone from the pre-call into the panel. So we thought we'd do it again. And Joanne, here's your chance to do so. We're back. On the call, we have talented athletes. They were athletes competitively, always athletes forever. It never goes away from any of us, but we have sports covered here, track, softball, basketball, figure skating, and more and that's just our panel. So I thought we can go quickly because I think the full introductions were done last time, and we do have a few attendees that were on the call last time. But what I'll do is I'll start with Joanne and think about, could you share with us a little bit more about your background? You can go further than your last intro on the previous call, and thinking about your takeaways from the last session.
So first I have no idea what I shared last time, to be honest with you.
Perfect.
So I don't know if I'll be repeating myself or not, but feel free to wave at me if I am. I think we talked quite a bit about my athletic background and figure skating and the lessons I learned from it. I think maybe I'll pivot a tiny bit this time because it's top of mind, but I have two kids. One of them is the reigning national champion for modern pentathlon. I think I mentioned that last time as well. The other one is passionate about flag football and soccer and lacrosse and anything that involves a team. And one of the things that I've learned over time is that we know we're all oriented differently, but my daughter's nursing an injury right now. She has a small stress fracture on her hip, and watching her navigate that as a recently turned 14-year-old who is extremely driven, and comparing it to my growing up experience as an athlete and what I learned about resiliency through injury, and then looking at my son where things roll off of him much differently. And how can we as women in leadership in sports, women who were professional athletes or elite athletes, how are we prepping the next generation to kind of navigate this path that we're on as well? And along those lines, my son had a really interesting thing he said to me the other day. He was invited to try out for some big lacrosse team. And my husband and I both at first were like, this is amazing, totally do it. I could see the reticence in his eyes. And I found myself sitting back and saying, what is it that you want to do, Reed? And he said, I thought this was kind of cute. He said, the 6th grade version of me thinks I can play in the pros one day, but the realistic version of me says it's probably not going to happen, but I know that I'm really good at math, and I'm thinking that maybe I can do something in a business role or be a GM one day. So I want to get as much exposure as I can to all different sports. And if you guys have me do this elite lacrosse league, I think I'm going to just know too much about lacrosse, but not enough about the other sports to do that. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing, right? And he's 11. And so I said to him, okay, well, keep the dream alive, but I get what you're saying. But again, I'm opening up with that because I think it's a different dimension of awareness that I'm trying to develop as I watch a kid trying to work through an injury and a kid saying, I don't want to be pushed that hard. And they're both in my same household. So don't know if that's relevant to what we're talking about, but there we are. That's me.
I think awareness very much lines up with how you find your voice, when to listen, when to speak up. And so I think it's wonderful and very impressive that at 6th grade to have that depth of understanding. It's amazing.
Well, and
Good job, Mom.
well, I mean, sort of, as parents, I think one of the hard parts is my husband works in pro soccer. He's with Major League Soccer. I work with pro athletes. I've been in pro, and so it felt like it was on me to recognize that my daughter's the one who's going to push herself as hard as she can, and I need to help her navigate that. But that if my son isn't oriented that way, that's okay too. And it doesn't really matter that I might look and go, he has this natural talent or whatever. You have to want it inside too. So again, it's finding the right sport, the right time, the right moment. That's where I'm going with it for now. So
amazing. Thank you for sharing. Shell, I think last time you did a great job of really bringing this advocacy of building your own self, how you talk through and position yourself for different avenues of your career. Can you talk to us a little bit more? First, introduce yourself briefly to the group and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, hello, my name is Shell Thompson. I'm actually a footwear tech developer at Nike. I've been there for a couple of years. I came in through the WIN program, which is Women in Nike, and it's a program that allows former athletes, or WNBA players in particularly, to come transition from court to corporate. And I was a track and basketball athlete for Texas Tech, and I mean, my life is sports. And so the biggest thing for me is I've always been a leader, and it's all about inspiring others to really just to find their authentic selves and to bring their authentic selves to positively impact and influence others. And that's really important to me. And so I try to use my space, and more importantly, my platform of an athlete and sports and background, to just bring those transferable skills of leadership and accountability and self-motivation, and really just have everyone to find the superpowers within themselves and bring that to their teams to elevate their team success.
Thank you. That was a big takeaway from last time of superpowers, building your superpowers. So we will ask you more about how you went about identifying them and then crafting and honing those skills. Monica, would you mind sharing a little more of your background? And a big takeaway for you was you attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. So obviously you've been in situations where you've probably been on the receiving end of that vinegar. So if you can talk a little bit more about how you've built that as maybe a mantra, or if it's not, that's okay. And share briefly what you're currently doing, your background as well.
Yep. So I'm Monica Lebron. I'm the Deputy AD for Championship Resources at the University of Tennessee. I've been here since February, and this is the 9th state I've lived in. So I've moved a lot, but I've always worked in college athletics after my playing career of playing softball from the time I was 5 until I graduated from Yale University. I also worked in athletics at Yale, and that's kind of when I realized I wanted to be an AD. So as far as, I guess, personalities, really wherever you go, I'm grateful to have played team sports, because I think you do learn quite a bit about how to interact, motivate, and support different types of people from different backgrounds with different personalities, and different emotions and reactions and responses. So, but I continue to learn as I go. I was just talking to a teammate of mine here at Tennessee, and he's pretty laid back. He's married, has 4 kids. I am not married. I don't have any kids. And we were interacting with another teammate, and I walked away and I said, "How do you remain so calm? Because I just want to strangle the person sometimes." And he said, "Well, I have 4 kids." So that's, for starters, but I know that I can, in our time together, I'm going to learn from him. I consider myself a very coachable person, but I also am not afraid to admit my weaknesses or the areas in which I know I need to get better. And so I usually will voice them out loud because I want to be coached, because I want my friends and my teammates to help me through the things I'm not as good at. And so, I continue to evolve, hopefully, but I'm continuing to learn and grow, and asking for help every day.
Sometimes begging for it, I guess, right? Sometimes really asking for it. I'm sure it's intimidating to provide feedback to you, Monica. I can only imagine these people, that the position you're putting, the request of the people that you're putting in that position. So I hopefully I don't have to be in that position for you, but good luck to those that do. And last but certainly not least, Tiana, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more of yourself. And I think when we talked last time, you spoke a lot about filling your cup, and just because you're speaking out and using your voice and finding where your fit is, and there's also time to recharge. So if you wouldn't mind maybe talking a little bit more into how you recharge to prep to go into those situations, as well as a brief intro, we'd certainly appreciate hearing more from you.
Yeah, so my name is Tiana. I'm a track and field athlete, two-time Olympian, three-time Olympic gold medalist, and not a team player in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Not because I don't play well with others, but because it's just me on the runway, or just me on the track, or just me in the gym. And so my approach to leadership is that of the reluctant leader, right? It's kind of just a position that I've had to lean into as I found myself and my voice. And my journey started by just advocating for me, which is why it's really important for us to all come from a place of knowing thyself, because then you can have the confidence in what you speak about, because you have that foundation that you're coming from. I am an introvert as well, even though most people don't believe that when they meet me, and therefore refilling my cup is extremely important so that I can continue to pour into others. It's almost as if, I do have a heart of service, but if I can't pour from an empty cup. And so a lot of my approach to being a leader and letting that be a sustainable life for me as I use my voice and advocate for others is to make sure that I have that usually scheduled downtime to just step away for a little bit and recharge. I think we've seen it a lot, being the go-to person for commentary on social injustice or racial injustice. Sometimes you got to push pause and take a step back, recharge yourself, and then get back out there and fight for another day. I think we all have arenas in which we are that go-to person for a lot of people. And so refilling that cup allows us to keep showing up as our highest self. And that's kind of the lane that I like to be in and remind others of as well on their own leadership journeys.
A very personal journey for each of us, and so finding someone to connect with and having that message resonate, I think is very important. So we are going to switch to some of the questions. We're a very small group, so certainly I think we can give back some time in everyone's day, and we could also open it up for questions from our attendees. So feel free to jump in at any time if you have a question for our panelists and their specific areas of expertise. The first one is really thinking about this application side of it. So part 2 of a session, we had general takeaways of leadership, discussions on how to start thinking about values. How do you start applying it? And I guess the first question is, when did it feel different that you felt like a leader? And so I'm going to start with you, Shell. And I'm going to ask you, from the transition to an athlete, when did you start to feel like you were applying some of this leadership and that you felt like I've arrived, and how that felt different maybe?
Yeah, like I said, I felt it very early on. I don't know if I told the story when I was in kindergarten, how my kindergarten teacher said that I was very good with just delegating tasks, and I wanted to make sure that everybody had, the opportunity to use the jump rope and all of that. And so I think as a kid, just naturally, I wanted to be a positive influence, but especially when I started playing sports, and not to toot my own horn, but I was just always, the elite player. And so I think I was just looked upon, from my coaches and my teammates to be the person that was the go-to person. And I wanted to make sure everyone was involved. So naturally, I just wanted to lead by example. It transitioned when I was in college to become more of a vocal leader, but I was always that player where people don't want to be told what to do, they want to be shown. And so I think naturally I just wanted to be that person to show up on time, to work hard, and then, never ask my teammates to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. But it was in college, I think, where I was kind of thrown into being that person where I had to kind of talk a little bit more and ask more of people.
I'm going to stick here and ask about your current position in business at Nike. Is there a time where you've applied who you were as a 5-6-year-old in kindergarten, the time that you were an athlete, and now that you're in your business side of your career, did it feel different when you're applying that leadership set?
No. And as soon as I walked on campus, I started to look at where I could bring the quality of leadership. And I thought that was important because, you know, naturally you want to come in, you're in a new environment and you don't know the people. But for me, it was like, this is still a team. It's just a different team. It's a bigger team. You know, it's not a small, intimate team of 12 or 15 women. It's a larger team of thousands of people. But how I show up is still the same. And how I talk to people is still the same. It's just a different court that I'm playing on. And so I think when I came into Nike, it was me being observant at first and seeing where the need was. You know, you don't want to come in and just start doing all those things, but I was looking and paying attention to what are the spots where I can bring and shine my light and show my strengths and just kind of connect with people. And as soon as I identified that, I took off with it. And I think people appreciated that. They were looking for it. You know, it was a new talent. It was a new voice. It was a new perspective. And then it was the voice of the athlete that people hadn't heard from a while, or heard from in a while, especially as a female.
Thank you. And Monica, I'm going to ask you similar questions of this application of leadership and finding your voice, but I'm going to ask you if there's a time you faltered or maybe spoke up and felt like it was a failure, but the learning lesson that you took away from it in finding that voice, if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Yeah, I've certainly failed my fair share. I think in general, the times I get most frustrated with myself is when I let little things get underneath my skin, you know, and I do not hide this face very well. So you will know when I'm happy and you will know when I'm not. And that's where, as I continue to engage in some leadership opportunities and I'm getting coached in that space, again, I'm very forthcoming with my shortcomings because I want to someday, even at the age of 42, I'm hoping that I can learn how to channel that in a more positive way. So again, it took my mom saying over and over again, the honey and vinegar routine. It took me a minute to change because I can be kind of stubborn. And so I feel like I've been a leader since the day I was around people. Like I've always had that, kind of like what Shell talked about. I've always had that inside of me. And not that I don't ever want to not bring my emotions to the table, because I think it's my emotions that can be positively influential as well, in a nurturing way. But it's when things, when I feel disrespected or when I'm frustrated with something, it's when I don't like the leader that I've become. So just learning how to channel that, I hope I can continue to get better at.
It's almost like in the beginning when you're figuring it out too. So it's this constant iteration and evolution, and it sounds like this innate leadership trait that lives within us it's just in a constant state of progress. And so evaluating it as such is very insightful from you and Shell. So I appreciate that. Joanne, I'm going to pivot a little bit on I guess the question is there ever a time where you might have been labeled as assertive? Because sometimes using your voice can be considered assertive. And can you share that little bit? And I'll ask this to most of the most of the attendees, and how did you respond when you received that label, or if you received that label?
Well, I think I heard it 3 times today. So I'm, gosh, it's the hardest thing to navigate. I mean, we all know this. It's what's labeled as aggressive or assertive or bossy or whatever in us as women is labeled as confident and bold in men. I mean, I'm 5'3" 3/4. I was a figure skater. I spoke through, music and movement. But I also knew that I needed to amplify my voice to get anything done. The problem is that what I found over the journey is that it's almost like you have to push it a little farther than you think in order to, and then draw back in order to get to where you want to go. But it's in some ways it's similar to salary negotiation, which I'm terrible at it, as I think most women are, because you start to have this, well, at least I do, I'll speak from the I sense. I start to have this feeling like if I push it too hard, then they're going to retract everything. And frankly, that's happened. I mean, I had a situation, I was working for a man who was very threatened by my confidence and by my presence. And he just, for him, it was the more I spoke up or spoke out or told him what I needed or where there was a challenge in our workplace, which he has not been able to keep a woman working for him, basically. It came back at me each time. So LJ, I mean, it's hard. And it's probably, again, I don't know why, I think I just have my kids top of mind right now, but I don't know how to even navigate it with my kids. And I try to call it as I see it. I don't know. I mean, I look at it sometimes and I think, okay, so she's my hero too, but my favorite, I love Merida in Brave. I mean, if any of you have seen the movie,
Who doesn't? Yeah.
Right. But, there's a little bit of that too. And my son looks like the triplets and whatever. But that being said, what I loved about the storyline around Merida was that she was basically, what I didn't like was that she had to mask her identity in order to be able to be taken seriously. But what I loved in sort of the Disney world was that when she rips off the mask and they realize that she's actually, or one of her red curls pops out and they realize it's actually her, that they're confused, because that's how it feels sometimes. It's like, I feel like if I were to put some sort of voice thing and show up and pretend that I was J-O-E instead of J-O, and I walked in and they didn't know the difference, could I do the big whip off and be like, you took me seriously? And I was exactly the same. I just now look like this. And Zoom enabled us to do a little bit more of that, but we just have a long way to go. I'm sorry, LJ, that was a really hard question to answer because I walk through it every day. And I think I will forever. It's one of the reasons why I'm my own boss now.
I think it is a very challenging question. And it's something that when we were planning this, when people were saying, how do leaders find their voice, was the big question. And honestly, being direct and confident and assertiveness were the questions that come up over and over. People tell me to speak up, but then I speak up and they tell me that was the time to sit back. So you hinted on that confusion there. You also touched upon the gender lines there as well. But certainly, I think it's a question for the panel is to times where you've been told to speak up where you should have sat back, and then times where you sat back and you should have, kind of like Monica, where it's eating at you, those little things where you should have spoken up.
Well,
and usually it's that gut check.
I want to double down on that a little bit. So
Please.
When I was a sophomore in college, so I was 19 years old, it was at University of Pennsylvania, living in West Philadelphia, I was mugged. And I was with 2 friends. And we were coming home from the library, AKA the bar, at 2 in the morning or whatever. And we're walking and this thing happens, right? And the three of us walked away from it very differently. One of my friends, you know, anyway, the thing that matters is that I couldn't let it fester inside me that something had happened and I didn't speak up, and that others could actually suffer harm as a result, because it was a problem of like lighting and blue light phones back in the day before we had cell phones. And so that was the first time I went and I just took action around something. And it was because it was a moment where my personal safety had been at risk. I mean, the guy who mugged me had a gun. I'm fine, whatever. I had a bruise, it's fine. But what was going to happen if I didn't speak up? And so that's, I think, sometimes where our voices, like, we can't hold them back. But I think where it hurts the most is when you look around and you're wondering, when you can't use your voice, who else is there with you, or who's going to back you up, or who's going to amplify it for you? Because sometimes you can't. And it goes back to what you're saying, LJ. If I stand up and advocate for myself every single time I see something that's not right, then you will be labeled as somebody who's always doing that. But if you're standing up and then the next time somebody else is standing up and you guys have each other's back. My favorite person I worked with when I was at the Golden State Warriors was an amazing, amazing trailblazer, Gail Hunter. Gail was with the NBA, the WNBA. She's amazing, but I knew I could just give her like a small eyebrow raise and she'd have my back in those executive leadership meetings. And I appreciated that. So we need that.
It builds right on your board of directors comments from last discussion, which we will dig into a little bit more. Shantae, I saw that you had a question before, so yes, let's get to it if you're comfortable with asking it now.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been dealing with that recently. I feel very confident speaking up, but I do feel like I'm in a constant state of, if I speak up on everything, when is it, I get a label, right? So I'm not allowed to go to my daughter's volleyball games because like, you didn't see this, but the last game that we went to, our team is predominantly Hispanic. They speak Spanish, and the other team was yelling racist slurs. And it was like, you don't even speak English and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, I already got on like parent probation for yelling at last game, but I can't let this one go. And so I spoke, and at the end of the game, I went to the coach and I said, good game. However, the racist slurs were not necessary. And the whole bench, I mean, the athletes, high schoolers, and the coach starts screaming and yelling at me. And, at this point, I'm running down the stairs. Oh, no. But other parents stepped up with me. And while I felt like it was one of the times where I was showing my behind the most, and I felt horrible because it was my husband worked at the school, my daughter's in middle school on varsity. So it's like, should I not say anything because should we feel privileged to be here? And I represent them. But then at the same time, there was a whole nother group of children that were being harassed by adults and kids and being racially profiled. And my daughter's the only Black girl on the team. What if it was her? And what if it was the N-word? And I was like, I had to speak up. And so when Joanne, you were talking about what you were going through, it really helped me see the difference. You have to, when it comes to your contract negotiations, you have to see how important it is. It's just as important as you speaking up for the girls who were getting mugged. And when you view it like that, you're able to tackle those situations a little bit differently, because you're like, man, like, I have to speak up for myself because the next woman shouldn't have to suffer through how I feel. So you empowered me, because I was just like, I don't know how to deal with that. I don't want to be labeled the jerk or the I'm not going to cuss, but like, I don't want to be labeled that woman. But I feel like I see so many injustices. The warrior inside of me wants to fight all of them. I guess you pick and choose your battles, but if it is important enough, you have to speak up. So thank you for that.
And that's exactly why I was saying, by the way, full disclosure, me and Shantae are friends. Okay, now that that's out of the way. That's why it's really important to take care of yourself, because we are inundated from all directions with stuff to be pissed about. And like somebody just asked me the other day, meeting up with friends here in Europe, they were like, I just don't understand, like with all that's going on in your country, how you're not mad all the time. I was like, I am mad all the time. Like, I just choose, you know, like I just have to be mindful of where I put my energy and what I'm advocating for. And then when I am quiet, it's not that I don't have an opinion, it's that I'm recharging so that I can get, you know, I can come off the bench refreshed and ready to play another quarter or whatever it is. And so it's less like picking and choosing when to speak up and when not. It's almost like just honor your pause and then get back out there, because just like Joanne, I dealt with a really abusive situation. I had two options. I could be quiet about it and just hope it kind of just slid away, like I just move on. I didn't want to be labeled as a victim. I didn't want that identity. And then my mom asked me, she was like, what obligation do you feel to the next woman? And I remember just sitting there, like, the day that I left that situation, I was like, so many of you knew what was going on and you didn't look out for me, and I cannot carry that cross. And so that's the reason I decided to speak up. So all of these things that we weigh on a regular basis, and it's not been a pleasant ride for me, let me tell you, but you just kind of have to remember what's important. You go back to your foundations, like, who am I? And am I willing to let this external situation in any way erode or compromise my values? And if the answer is hell no, then say something. Period.
So,
another,
yeah, please go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think another piece to that too is why you connect with people and build those relationships, because although we would like to fight every battle, it's tiresome. And so, but when you have people in your corner, when you get to recharge, like Tiana says, that's when your squad, so to speak, can have your back and step up and speak on your behalf. And then putting yourself in situations. I think it's beautiful that Shantae, knows she's not a Latino woman, but she was able to just flip it around and put herself in the other person's shoes and say, well, what if it was me? And if we did that more, then we would be able to speak up more.
But isn't it so interesting that it's so much easier to speak up on behalf of somebody else than it is ourselves? Like Shantae, I relate to that. I relate to it so strongly, because I can be like hardcore, like, this isn't okay, it's wrong. But when it comes to defending myself, I think there's somehow, it's like you're letting your armor down. You're saying, like, you got to me. And that's really hard for me personally. I look at it like I've worked in these environments where I've had to have my armor up all the time. And so if I allow somebody in and my daughter's a fencer, so clearly I can think of these terms, but it literally feels like that. Like, am I allowing myself to be vulnerable? And which part of me am I allowing to be vulnerable? And if it's going to cut at something that's so deep. I had this guy at the Niners. He was a facilities guy. He didn't like me at all. Like, he just flat out didn't. And he cussed me out once in front of a Make-A-Wish kid, because I had set up the tent to cover the family myself, and that's supposed to be his job or something. I don't even know what it was, but that was the impetus for him to dislike me, because I didn't find him and I did it myself. It carried on and on into this place where he was being verbally abusive to me and to other women within the organization. It was solely around women, but I couldn't stand up for myself when he was doing it. But when it affected two women who worked for me, I went straight to HR and was like, get him like, I'm over it. Like, I'm done. And the HR person, I remember, she said, well, has he been like this to you as well? And I said, 2 years worth of it. Yes. Well, why didn't you come to us sooner? And it became like it was on me, right? Why didn't you come to us sooner? And I said, well, I guess I wasn't comfortable coming to you if it was just me, because I would think that you thought that I was just being overly sensitive or emotional or blah, 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 all the things that people label you when you come to say that something is bothering you. So it was like, I tried to not make it it was just one of those things where I could defend the other people, but I couldn't stand there and say it was me. I don't think I've ever shared that story, by the way, just so you know. It's like, it actually brings back some bizarro memories.
Well, thank you for sharing it.
It took another year for them to fire this guy too. Like,
They had to build that case, right? The
well,
back
he was so
history wasn't
valuable
enough.
as you know, in the facilities world. He was totally replaceable, I'm sure. But anyway.
I think the interesting shift that we're seeing is that we've built up that facade. And so on the last call, we talked about building that support. So filling your cup, building that board of directors, people who put you in check so that you're confident that your voice is solid because you've referred to them and they've okayed it, or you didn't say something right and they'll tell you. And so I think if we can, you know, Joanne, you talked about letting people in beyond that armor, but if we could ask all of the panelists, whoever wants to speak first, is we know that building that network is important, but sometimes at work you put that facade on and you don't let people in. And so maybe we can share with our attendees how that works for each of you. Do you just let people in, you give everyone a chance, or who gets into that board of directors seat? Monica, maybe we'll start with you if that's okay, or others if they want to.
I have the tendency to let everyone in. I let my guard down pretty easily. I'm pretty open and honest and transparent. It's worked for me because I feel like I endear myself to other people, and then they respond positively. So that's always just been my approach. It has backfired in the workplace, where people just flip the switch and all of a sudden you see a different side. And so a couple times it has backfired, and I've thought, okay, do I need to think twice about my approach? And certainly as you climb the ladder, you certainly think about it more often. But I think at the end of the day, I still have to be me, and I probably trust too much, but I also find that people respond positively to it. So, but I know I have to be careful, especially if I'm trying to reach that ultimate athletic director chair. I mean, the term "it's lonely at the top" exists for a reason. So, and I think I talked about this on the last panel, but just making sure you do have those outlets that you can talk to, so it's not as lonely as they say it is.
Thank you. Tiana, is it lonely at the top?
I just want to push back a little bit against the word facade, because I don't feel like it's a facade that I have. But it is a body of work. It's like it takes a lot of work to get to a certain position. And so then you do kind of wonder if I say this, does this change the perception that they have of me, but not necessarily like crumble a facade that I was wearing that wasn't legit. I am not a very trusting or open person, but I do make sure I have my select group of people that I can fall apart to. so that I can just get back out there and be the warrior I need to be in whatever arena that is. But I don't feel the need to do that in those places. So I think for me, it's just like learning to read the room. Like Monica has a great experience reading the room, and her approach has largely been successful. Even if it's backfired a handful of times, it's worked most of the time. For me, it's kind of like I need to be the fly on the wall, observe, and then I react based on the read that I get, and I go from there. I hope that answers the question, but yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
No, I think you've just given us two different versions of it that our attendees can choose from. We'll welcome any questions anyone else attending certainly have, but we actually have a question for the attendees. Nikita, would you be able to share how maybe you applied last session, and maybe the panelists can help contribute to your dialogue as well?
Sure. So sorry I came late, first of all, but I was able to pick up on some great conversation just now. But last week we talked, I guess, about or the last session about what it means to be a leader, and everyone had very different approaches. And I think for me, I always viewed it as someone who was an extrovert, or one kind of identity that every leader has. And it was really, it was kind of a confidence boost almost for me to hear that everyone can be a leader, anyone can be a leader. In fact, that I am one as I am right now. And just that alone kind of gave me confidence throughout the week, and has kind of lasted with me really about how I can lead by example, even if I'm not so outspoken, just by being a role model to others, or yeah, speaking up when I see something wrong. So that was my biggest takeaway, I think, from the first session, was that leadership can come in various forms, and that I am already a leader as I am. And just that was very powerful for me, just knowing that.
Thank you. Panelists, feel free to build on if something stands out too. Mary Elizabeth was also at the last session. Mary Elizabeth, would you like to share how you applied thoughts from the last session?
Yeah, I was actually just going to add on to what she just said, but I think like I think a lot of what we talked about, I remember with Tiana, was like how I think the breakout room I was in, we were all agreed we were introverts, and like sometimes would take time to ourselves, but then also to know when to speak up and whatnot. And at least for me, in the last few weeks, we just had a couple new people started on our team at work, and just reaching out to them and trying to like see however you can be helpful and like help making it an easy transition for them, because I knew people had done that for me. And like also setting a boundary of like being able to help and like have them shadow, but then also making time for yourself as well. So I think doing that and reaching out to others was super important, but then also making time for yourself as well, so you can still be productive.
Thank you, Nikita and Mary Elizabeth. Monica, Joanne, Tiana, Shell, any last thoughts on finding your voice? We are coming towards time, and we'll make sure we stick to it. But any last thought that you'd like to share with our attendees? Tiana, go for it.
I just wanted to say, like, with bouncing off of what Nikita and Mary said, there is not one way to be a leader, just like there isn't one way to be human. And because there is not one way to be human, we need all different types of leaders, because certain people don't respond well to the barking in the face or the drill sergeant. They need the role model, somebody that they can just, look out through the peripheral and see how to do it right. Like Shell said, people want to be shown, not told. And so there's like, just embrace and understand and have confidence in the fact that you were born with a particular set of skills, like Liam Neeson in Taken. You were born with a certain set of skills, and that uniquely qualifies you to be a leader in your way. And then when you are in those rooms, invited to those tables, in these settings where, as introverts or whatever it is, you're slightly uncomfortable, your superpower is just awareness. Just take a beat and read the room, or just observe, listen first, and then react. And then only react from your zone of genius, from what from your core. And that really will keep you in line and aligned most of the time.
Thank you. Joanne?
I think it's also, right, Tiana, your words are really resonant. Like I think we all need to take that in. We also have to remember that our leadership voice evolves as we do. And so the first time you test out what it's like to be a leader and you fail a little bit, like you just have to keep coming back. My dad used to say this thing all the time, which I appreciate. He'd say, we're going to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake and you don't learn from it, then what was the point of making the mistake? So he would work with us on owning those moments and those mistakes. Because I don't know, any of you remember being in middle school? I'm experiencing this with my son right now with the stretching of truth occasionally. And so I sat down with him and I said, why is it that you say you've done this when you actually have not? And I'm going to figure it out because I'm really smart. I'm your mom. I know you. And he said, well, I'm worried I'm going to get in trouble. And that's a little bit like, again, as we're thinking about our leadership voices, when I've been most afraid that I'm going to get in trouble, I'm going to step over an invisible line that I didn't know existed or whatever, then those aren't great environments for me, by the way. Like I try to lead from a place of like, I want you to try something you've never tried before and see how that feels and looks. But being able to take a deep breath and laugh at ourselves a little bit once in a while is really important. And I mean, how many of you have had a moment where you're like, you'll never forget the dumb thing you said or whatever? It's like, or maybe you were in tears because somebody misinterpreted something you said or whatever. I mean, I lived in a sorority house in college. So let me tell you, there were a lot of misinterpretations happening. But through all of that, I can take a step back and go, all right, you know what? That was a dumbass thing to say. I got it. I'm gonna learn from it. I'm not going to do that again. But when I've pretended like I didn't do it, that's when I've gotten myself an even deeper place of like not really finding my voice. So I feel like I owe each of you $25 for a copay because somehow this has felt like a counseling session, but I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity for us to find a place where we can be vulnerable. And kind of to LJ's point, if we're looking for that safe place to be with people where we don't feel, yeah, I agree, Tiana, support groups for the win. I mean, it's finding your people. My people, I've found my counterparts when I was at the NFL, all the women, it was mostly women for whatever reason, who ran community affairs or the foundations, we would get together and I could stay up all night talking to them because I knew that they got where I was coming from. And we also, this is really important in the lesson that we learn early on, but when somebody asks you for the opportunity to share something in confidence, to keep it confident, in confidence, yes, keep it in confidence. Because that's something that I've been burned by and have inadvertently burned others too. Somebody came to me and said she was worried about some migraines, and then I said something to somebody and I still look back and I'm like, I know I shouldn't have said that. I thought it was harmless, but for her it was a thing. And so that's another piece of it. It's finding those people you can trust. And with that, I will close my counseling session and thank all of you for, just kidding.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. Shell, and Monica, I want to give you a chance if you'd like to add some any parting thoughts.
I was just going to say, don't let anybody dim your light. You will show up as your authentic self, and there are going to be people that don't like you. And that's okay. It's not your job to get people to like you. It's your job to live your purpose. And understand that people will, on a day-to-day basis, deflect and put their emotions and their feelings and their jealousy and all of that on you. You have to ground yourself enough to know that you can't take on other people's things. And so for me, it's very important. You have to draw a boundary for yourself, read the energy. I meet people where they are. You can like me or not, but I know what in my heart I'm here to do. And I can have all the haters in the world. That doesn't take my attention away from what God's purpose is for me. So I think if you just put that in the center of everything that you do, when you do have those people who are pushing against you, you won't take that on because you know they're just a part of your journey too. Everybody is in your life for a reason, even the people that are against you, because there are valuable lessons that they can also teach you along the way. So just remember that. Stay centered and grounded and focused on your purpose.
Tiana, can you repeat the phrase, building off what Shell's saying, the phrase that you used when you said finding something? I really liked it, but I'm having trouble kind of pulling it back together. You said something about figuring out what your magical something was. Folks, help me. Do you remember?
I'll have to think about it because I don't know. I was just kind of like flowing.
Yeah, and a zone of genius. There it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Mira.
Okay.
That, building off of what Shell just said, it is like I've gotten to this place at this point where I'm like, I know what my zone of genius is, and I'm also willing to let go of trying to be the genius of everything. Like admitting what I don't know, finding people who do, and also saying to them, like, you've got this thing that isn't inside of me, and look at how much more powerful we are together. And I think as women, that's something that we can really do in a unique way. But But Shell, I totally agree. It's like, I know what my God-given gifts are, and I also know the doors that were opened for me. And I also know some things I'm not very good at. So it's okay to kind of lean into that. So yeah. That's all I have to say today too.
I know we're wrapping up, so I'll make it quick. I think I've said it before. I'll continue to repeat myself. Find the people that will celebrate you and champion you. There will be highs, there will be lows in any industry you choose in this life that you live. And you're going to want those outlets. When something's good, you're going to want that person that can hug you. And when things are bad, you're going to want that person that can listen to you. And when you report to someone who doesn't believe in you, you're going to need that outlet because they will always believe in you and they'll lift you up in the times where you still have to be around that person and they're trying to dull your sparkle or bring you down. So just make sure you find those people, and it can be coworkers if you trust them. It can be your family, your siblings, your parents, your significant other, but make sure you have your people that will continue to lift you up.
Can I say one more thing? And it just came up today. I decided I come to Europe all the time, almost live here part-time with the exception of COVID, which disrupted everything. But today I decided to be a tourist in London because I see so much, but I don't know the history, right? So I did this hop on, hop off bus tour, right? Like very, very much selfie stick and all, leaning right into the tourist, fanny pack, selfie stick, hop on, hop off bus tour. Anyway, we get to this bridge that was built in World War II, I believe. And he said, this is the only bridge in London that was not only delivered on time, but below budget. It is also the only bridge built by women. The entire project was built, led, and designed by women because the men had gone off to war. And so I just remember thinking that when I rode past this bridge, like most people don't know that when they're walking on it or driving through that, but just the takeaway for me in that moment was there is a place for you. There is a place for you and your gifts. And even if it isn't always acknowledged, there is something that only you can do. Like only women could deliver a bridge on time and under budget. The only one in this entire country, I believe, at that time. So I just want you all to build your own bridges and take that away with you.
I don't know how I could wrap up any better than that. So I'm not. Tiana, you're on top. Everyone is on top. Thank you so much for all of your contribution, your time, your energy, and thoughtfulness in answering the questions, going further, and even thinking about our attendees. I think that they could not be in better hands with each of you. Miriam, any closing thoughts?
Well, LJ, thank you for the moderating the two panels so well and the lovely question. I think you did an excellent job. It really definitely made the conversation flow really well. And ladies, to all of you, thank you so much. I mean, I'm sure the younger ladies in here have been inspired, but I certainly have been really inspired, and I can relate to a lot of the sentiment and stories that you have shared and situations that I've been in as well. So this was beautiful, and thank you for taking the time. Joanne dropped in a little info about the Athlete Voices event tomorrow in the chat if you guys want to have a look at that.
It's free, it's live, 2 p.m. It's the first of a 9-part series. And then check out athletesvoices.org for all of you who are elite athletes. We will be hosting a convening in the Santa Cruz Mountains for 3 days with academics from Harvard, Brown, the HBCU Consortium of Athletic Conferences, and San Jose State and a few others. But we have an incredible group of people all exploring how they can take their experience as athletes and turn it into voices for action. So, and scholarships. We're going to make it possible for everybody to attend. We have some NBA and NFL guys who bring in the big bucks so that we can sponsor everybody else, because we know there's no equity in pay yet. But meanwhile, tune in tomorrow. I have Tori Smith, Odessa Jenkins, Carol Stern, who's the president of the Walton Family Foundation, and Elena Nichols, who's the most decorated Paralympian of all time. They're all going to be on this panel talking about voices. So join us. Anyway, my pitch is done.
Thanks, Joanne. Thank you. Thank you again to all of you. Have a lovely night, day, whatever time it is for you. Thank you,
Thank you.
LJ.
Thank you, Miriam, for doing this. This is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shell.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I will actually miss you, ladies.
Oh, I know. Well, you still have us. We're stuck.
Bye.
All right. Take care, ladies. Bye.
Thank you.